Hey guys, tonight we're peeling back the velvet curtain of time to tiptoe into the bedrooms. Yes, bedrooms of some of history's most revered minds. As the stars wheel overhead, you're stepping into creaky studies lit by oil lamps, past piles of half-finished notebooks and unsettlingly quiet violins, to find out just how and when these geniuses managed to sleep, if they ever did at all. Imagine this. It's the middle of the night in Renaissance Italy. The moon is soft and milky. A draft curls under the workshop door, and Leonardo da Vinci is not asleep. No, you find him hunched over a canvas, quietly muttering about optics anatomy and how annoying it is that his fellow humans insist on sleeping for 8 hours a night. Because here's the thing, Leonardo didn't do sleep like the rest of us. He followed what's now called a polyphasic sleep schedule. That's a fancy term for taking multiple short naps throughout the day instead of one long slumber. Legend says he'd sleep 15 to 20 minutes every 4 hours, which sounds less like a nap and more like what your cat does when it's trying to keep you emotionally confused. Historians still argue whether Da Vinci truly stuck to this sleep routine long term, or if it was just a quirky experiment in his endless list of quirky experiments. Some say it was a practical choice. More waking hours meant more time to invent flying machines and dissect dead pigs. Others think it was exaggerated, possibly even apocryphal, a bedtime story we like to tell ourselves about tortured brilliance. But here's what we do know. Leonardo's notebooks are filled with reminders to nap, not sleep. He believed rest came in intervals, not blocks. He saw the day as a fabric to stitch with bursts of wakefulness and restoration. So rather than sinking into a deep 8-hour slumber, Leonardo would resurface from sleep like a thoughtful dolphin, blinking, sketching, dozing, sketching again. You imagine him now slipping into a chair near his window, eyes closing not out of exhaustion but as a kind of ritual. There's no soft bed, no pajamas with little fleur-de-lis, just robes and scribbles and a moment of intentional stillness. And if you're wondering, wait, how did he not go insane doing this well? Maybe he did just a little. After all, you have to be a little touched to believe you can build a helicopter out of wood and parchment. But madness and genius, they often hold hands like unruly twins at a moonlit crossroads. Modern science would throw up red flags all over Leonardo's sleep schedule. A consistent polyphasic pattern like that, especially without modern recovery strategies, would cause cognitive fog, memory lapses, and possibly vivid hallucinations, which, now that we think of it, might explain a few of his more avant-garde inventions. And yet there's something poetic about it, isn't there? The idea of stretching time like dough, of stealing extra hours from the night and baking them into your brilliance. Leonardo didn't sleep like us because he didn't think like us. Or maybe he didn't think like us because he didn't sleep like us. You yawn a little, feeling the edge of sleep pulling at your own brain. Don't worry. We're not putting you on Leonardo's nap plan. You get to stay horizontal. Meanwhile, Leonardo rises quietly in your mind's eye. Somewhere between a dream and a blueprint, his candle is still burning. The cat he keeps for company curls in the corner. And you're just beginning this dreamy little stroll through the minds and beds of history's oddest geniuses. You drift further into the labyrinth of Leonardo's nocturnal habits, where the soft ticking of a Renaissance clock and the faint rustle of parchment set an almost hypnotic rhythm in the dark. In this eerie calm, you picture him, the great polymath, napping like a cunning fox, while his mind paints entire worlds on weathered canvases. It's said that during those late-night hours when the rest of the world slumbers deep, Leonardo would sneak a catnap at precisely 2 a.m., a time when even the moon seems to doze off. You see him tucked away in a shadowed alcove of his cluttered studio, a half-finished sketch of an impossible flying machine dangling from his calloused fingers. As you inch closer in your imagination, you catch sight of a small detail. A rolled-up piece of paper marked with cryptic symbols and doodles that hint at a secret technique for capturing dreams on canvas. This isn't merely a nap. It is the birthplace of genius, a fleeting moment where inspiration and rest meet in a delicate dance. Leonardo's sleep was as much a work of art as his masterpieces. His polyphasic schedule wasn't just a method. It was a lifestyle, one that allowed bursts of creativity to flourish in the quiet corridors of midnight. Picture him, eyes half shut, a faint smile playing on his lips as he drifts between the realms of vivid dreams and waking ideas. He claims with a twinkle in his eye that a short nap was all he needed to reset his mind to conjure up revolutionary ideas that would later take shape in his breathtaking paintings. Historians still argue whether Leonardo truly adhered to this rigorous regimen for his entire life, or if it was simply an occasional indulgence, a way to squeeze a few extra hours of inspiration out of a day. One fringe theory even whispers that he once invented a hidden nap nook in his workshop, complete with a makeshift hammock suspended between two towering stacks of canvases. You can almost laugh at the absurdity, Leonardo, the legendary inventor of flying machines, engineering a contraption solely for the purpose of a power nap. As you wander through this scene, you find yourself smiling at the paradox of it all. Here's a man known for his insatiable curiosity, scribbling notes about human anatomy and the mechanics of motion in one moment, and then drifting off into a blissful slumber the next, almost as if he was saying, "Pardon me, I'm rebooting my genius." It's a gentle reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary ideas come when you're not consciously striving for them, but rather when you surrender to the softness of sleep. You notice a quirky detail in one of his lesser-known notebooks, a hastily scrawled note about the optimal nap angle and the precise curvature of a cushion that supposedly enhances dream clarity. This odd snippet, almost comical in its precision, hints at Leonardo's unyielding determination to master every aspect of his existence, even the art of napping. It's as if he believed that every second of rest was a precious fragment of time, a perfect opportunity to let the subconscious spill its secrets. And then there's the gentle irony of it all. Imagine yourself lying under your own blanket, wondering if you could ever harness the same spark of creativity while battling the snooze button. The thought itself tickles you a bit, like realizing you've been trying to connect your Wi-Fi to a 15th century painting. You chuckle softly at the modern absurdity, a light joke in the dark that reminds you even geniuses sometimes get lost in the dreamscape of sleep. In this tender interplay between waking brilliance and the quiet surrender of rest, you begin to understand that Leonardo's unconventional sleep habits were not signs of weakness or eccentricity, but rather a calculated embrace of life's unexpected rhythms. Each brief reprieve from wakefulness was a chance to recalibrate, to unleash bursts of creativity in an otherwise stifling world. Your mind lingers on the image, a dimly lit room, a faint, steady hum of creative energy, and a master of art and science, gently, almost imperceptibly recharging for another bout of genius. The air is thick with the aroma of oil paint and ancient parchment, and you sense that in these moments of deliberate rest, there is a quiet rebellion against the monotonous tyranny of a structured day. You feel an odd kinship with this timeless ritual, a shared secret that transcends centuries. Like Leonardo, you sometimes yearn to press pause on the constant demands of alertness, to allow your mind to wander into the uncharted territories of dreams. The idea is both tantalizing and comical. Who would have thought that the path to greatness might also be paved with little naps? As you continue to absorb the scene, a smile creeps over your face at the whimsy of it all. The genius of the catnapper who painted the world isn't just in his ability to create, it's also in his audacity to redefine what it means to rest. And while you may not aspire to mimic his exact routine, you can't help but be inspired by the liberating notion that perhaps greatness resides not solely in relentless labor, but in the brave surrender to a well-timed slumber. Now you gently roll out of Renaissance Florence and into the early 20th century, where the air smells faintly of pipe smoke and ink, and the world is brimming with new physics. You're slipping into the long wool socks. Well, let's be honest, probably barefoot of one of the sleepiest geniuses to ever scribble on a blackboard, Albert Einstein. You find him in a quiet room in Princeton, the windows frosted, and the radiator clanking like it's muttering equations under its breath. A worn couch sags in the corner. Books pile up like sleepy dominoes, and on the floor there's a violin case slightly ajar. Einstein is not up pacing or working feverishly at this moment. No, he is fast asleep. And frankly, he's been that way for nearly 10 hours. Unlike our nap-happy friend Leonardo, Einstein wasn't into slicing his day into micro-sleeps. Nope, he was a fan of the classic uninterrupted, luxurious slumber clocking in at about 10 hours a night, thank you very much. On top of that, he indulged in regular afternoon naps. That's right. The man who unlocked the universe's secrets also made sure to unlock his eyelids, as often as possible. Historians still argue whether Einstein's extended sleep was a necessity due to neurological overclocking or simply a man refusing to face mornings. One fringe theory suggests he intentionally trained himself to sleep longer to simulate thought incubation, allowing complex ideas to ferment while he dreamt. It's very on-brand if you think about it. Let your brain solve problems while you're off snoring into the pillow. You picture him now, hair wild, even in slumber mouth, slightly agape, dreaming in equations. His day might start with a late breakfast, maybe reading the newspaper in slippers before taking a stroll to the Institute for Advanced Study. But it's always sleep first, relativity second. And that violin, not just for show. He often played it in the evening, letting melodies soothe his thoughts, softening the edges of his theories, until they folded gently into his subconscious. That's a kind of bedtime story only physicists tell themselves. Einstein once reportedly said that if he couldn't solve a problem, he'd sleep on it, sometimes, quite literally. And here's the delicious irony: some of his most revolutionary insights, like elements of his theory of relativity, were partially sparked in daydreams and sleep states. It's like he time-traveled through slumber. One quirky tidbit: Einstein often slept with a metal spoon in his hand while sitting in a chair. If he dozed off too deeply, the spoon would drop onto a metal plate, waking him. Sounds familiar? Yes, it's suspiciously similar to Edison's nap trick, which we'll get to in just a bit. But here it's oddly tender. You can almost hear the spoon fall with a soft clang, a punctuation mark between genius and exhaustion. There's something comforting about Einstein's sleep habits, isn't there? No tortured artist schedule, no denying biology, just unapologetic naps and extra long nights, as if his mind demanded more time to untangle cosmic puzzles. But not everyone was impressed. Some of his peers joked that Einstein slept more than he worked. Others whispered that his breakthroughs came in spite of his sleep, not because of it. Still, there's growing modern support that his brain may have actually processed high-level abstract concepts during those long REM cycles. Imagine curled up beneath thick wool blankets, Einstein's neurons firing away, replaying lectures he never gave, solving paradoxes he hadn't yet seen. It's the kind of mental symphony that happens only when the conscious mind takes a bow and lets the backstage crew do their thing. And here you are, lying comfortably thinking, perhaps it's not the worst idea to take your brain offline for a while. If 10 hours of sleep a night is good enough for Einstein, surely 7 will do for you. You almost want to whisper thank you to him, not just for E Comandre MC2, but for giving permission to the rest of us to sleep in without guilt, to treat naps as sacred spaces where insight can bloom quietly beneath closed eyelids. So let the pipe rest in its ashtray. Let the violin hum a silent tune in the corner. Einstein bundled up, and dreaming in space-time curves shows you that sometimes the smartest thing you can do is nothing at all. You stay nestled in this cozy timeline, and now the air around you smells a bit more like burnt tobacco and chalk dust. You're still with Einstein barefoot brilliant and surprisingly snuggly, but tonight you're following him not into the cosmos, but into his strange and strangely soothing evening routine. Picture it. He's sitting by the window, his silhouette curled in a high-backed chair like a comma at the end of a long, thoughtful sentence. A pipe in one hand, the bowl glowing faintly orange. The other hand cradles a well-worn book, sometimes Tolstoy, sometimes Schopenhauer, sometimes a sheaf of his own scrawled notes that he rereads like bedtime poetry. The windows are cracked just enough to let in a breeze, and every so often a moth flutters past, perhaps whispering a theory in Morse code. This is how Albert Einstein prepared for bed, not with lavender oil or white noise machines, but with philosophy violins and pipe smoke, like an insomniac wizard trying to charm his brain to sleep. But it wasn't just the rituals, it was the vibe. He didn't keep strict hours or set alarms. Some nights he'd be up until 2 a.m. scribbling ideas. Others he'd collapse into bed at dusk after an especially satisfying noodle lunch. The one consistent thing, he refused to wear socks. Ever. Even to bed. Even in the dead of winter. This wasn't just personal style. It was a small rebellion, a toe-wiggling protest against unnecessary constraint. Historians still argue whether this sock-free lifestyle meant anything philosophically. Was it about minimalism, comfort? Did his toes need room to calculate space-time? No one knows, but there's something oddly intimate about imagining him climbing into bed, hair static, charged from too much thinking feet, bare blanket pulled up to his chin as he drifted into the gentle fog between wakefulness and what he called the sacred darkness. And that pipe? It wasn't just a habit, it was practically a meditative device. Einstein once claimed that smoking helped him calmly ponder difficult questions. He'd light up in the evening puff softly by the window, then close his eyes, not quite asleep, not quite awake, floating in that squishy brain space where ideas sneak in sideways. The violin, of course, played its role too. He didn't play to perform. He played to think. Bow gliding gently across strings, his fingers found clarity in the sound. And somehow the act of playing even badly, which some claim he did, quieted the noise of the day and invited the kind of sleep that only comes when you've already spoken to your soul. Quirky detail time he also talked in his sleep. His housekeeper once reported catching snatches of muttered German phrases, tangled equations, and the occasional giggle. Imagine lying in the next room listening to Einstein mumble his dreams about photons and geometry like a bedtime radio show from another dimension. And here's a thought you might not expect. Einstein didn't believe in free will. He thought every action, even your decision to brush your teeth or steal one more pillow, was the inevitable result of prior conditions. So when he fell asleep each night, he did so with the peaceful notion that nothing was out of place. Even dreams, perhaps, were pre-written stanzas in the poem of time. You breathe a little deeper, your own shoulders relaxing as you think about that. The way he let go of control, drifted downstream, and surrendered to the rhythm of the cosmos. There's something profoundly gentle about it. His brain did the heavy lifting. Sleep was the applause. And maybe that's the real lesson here, not in the equations or the theories, but in the stillness, in the way a genius makes peace with rest, You don't have to solve relativity to earn your rest tonight. You just need to lay your head down, let your feet be as gloriously sockless as they please, and float with the same quiet confidence Einstein had when he closed his eyes. No alarm clocks, no pressure, just you, the dark, and a brain that knows it's okay to pause. You're gliding now into the world of flickering bulbs and buzzing laboratories where genius doesn't sleep, it just naps, reluctantly. And who better to guide you through this strange realm than Thomas Edison, the man who gave us the light bulb, and then did everything in his power to keep us from turning it off. Edison's relationship with sleep was, shall we say, complicated. You settle into a time when industry was humming gears, grinding, and Edison was right in the middle of it all, wearing a vest pocket full of stubbornness and probably a dash of caffeine. Unlike Einstein, who championed sleep like a luxurious mental spa, Edison saw sleep as a weakness. He called it a heritage from our cave days. To him, rest was a thief robbing him of productive hours. He bragged about sleeping only 4 hours a night, as if nodding off for longer was some kind of moral failure. But here's the twist that'll make you smile in the dark, he napped. Constantly. Historians still argue whether Edison truly believed his anti-sleep rhetoric, or if he was just posturing for reporters. Because behind the scenes he was a world-class napper. We're talking dozing on benches, floors, workshop tables, any surface that didn't actively buzz with electricity. He'd pass out mid-sentence and spring back up like he'd just dreamed an entire patent. You imagine it now, a cluttered lab glass beakers catching the afternoon sun, and Edison curled up in a dusty corner like a grumpy house cat, mumbling about alternating currents in his sleep. His assistants learned to tiptoe around him, unsure if he was in a nap or a full-blown recharge cycle. Here's a quirky detail: he kept a cot in his office tucked between filing cabinets and electrical diagrams. He'd vanish for 10 minutes, emerge rejuvenated, and then declare sleep is a waste of time, like no one just saw him drooling on a rolled-up blueprint. And yet, despite his naps, he held fast to the idea that only weak minds slept too much. One can only imagine the cognitive dissonance. Perhaps he thought his naps didn't count because they were short, like sleep tapas, genius served in bite-sized portions. One of his more famous quotes was, "There is no substitute for hard work." But if you pressed your ear to the lab wall, you'd hear a substitute quietly snoring in the next room. Even so, his output was staggering: thousands of patents, dozens of inventions, and endless hours spent tweaking phonographs or tormenting rival inventors with superior marketing. He had energy for sure, but he also had power naps, the unsung hero of invention. And here's where the story gets a little cozy again. Edison wasn't totally heartless about rest. He believed in the mental refreshment of stepping away, of letting the mind wander when the wires got tangled. He just didn't want the public to associate him with, well, pillows. It didn't fit the myth. So while Einstein napped with a violin nearby, and Da Vinci planned his day around micro-rests, Edison fought sleep like a boxer, only to sneak into the locker room for a 5-minute lie-down. There's something kind of charming about that contradiction. A man who lit up the night, and yet couldn't resist the call of a nap, when the wiring in his own brain started to flicker. You meanwhile are now half covered in your blanket, listening to the hum of your own thoughts, and maybe thinking, okay, fine. Maybe a nap now and then is revolutionary. And it is. Especially the kind that asks for nothing, demands no genius, and only wants you to close your eyes and breathe. Edison didn't want to sleep, but sleep had other plans. And tonight, so do you. You're drifting now into one of the oddest corners of sleep history, a trick so delightfully bizarre you almost suspect it was invented by a magician, not an inventor. But no, this bit of sleep science sleight of hand comes from none other than Thomas Edison himself. Picture the scene. Edison, slightly rumpled, maybe with a graphite smudge on his cheek, slumps into an armchair in the dim corner of his workshop. The buzz of machines fades into the background. In his right hand, he holds a handful of steel ball bearings. Below his hand, just a few inches, a metal tray waits silently on the floor. You see what he's doing, right? This wasn't a party trick or idle fidgeting. This was Edison's legendary micro-nap system. Here's how it worked. As he dozed off, the muscles in his hand would relax and clang. The ball bearings would fall onto the tray with a sharp jolt, instantly waking him up. Just enough sleep to refresh the brain. Not enough to fall too deep into that dangerous thing called rest. It's like the espresso shot of naps. Or as Edison might have put it, a brief lapse in consciousness optimized for maximum mental combustion. You can't help but grin. It's so theatrical, so specific, so Edison. Historians still argue whether this method actually worked or whether it was more of a placebo ritual. Did the brain really benefit from a 20-second half-dream? Was this micro-sleep enough to unjam mental cogs? Or was it simply Edison's way of tricking himself into resting without admitting defeat? And here's the best part. He wasn't the only one who did this. Salvador Dali, the mustachioed surrealist painter, did the same thing. Except instead of ball bearings, Dali used a heavy brass key. And instead of a tray, he placed a plate on the floor. When the key dropped, it clanged, he woke up, and supposedly returned to painting melting clocks with renewed vigor. So now you have to wonder, were these men sleeping? Or snatching dreams out of midair before they had a chance to fade? You imagine Edison doing this night after night, perched in silence, letting his mind hover just on the edge of unconsciousness, where wild ideas fly loose, and the rational brain momentarily forgets how to say no. It's like fishing for genius in the dark, baiting the line with steel balls and the hum of a sleepy mind. But also, it's deeply human. This desire to sleep just a little, but not too much. To rest without surrendering. It's the tension between ambition and biology, between the urge to create and the body's whisper that says, "Hey, maybe lie down for 5 minutes." Of course, Edison wasn't always gentle with himself. There are reports of him going entire nights without sleep when he was deep in a project. Assistants said he could go 72 hours fueled on coffee stubbornness and perhaps a dash of chaos. But even then, the ball-bearing trick stayed close, a strange kind of trust fall with the subconscious. What's funny is that modern scientists now explore this technique with more serious vocabulary. They call it hypnagogic insight, that slippery mental space between wakefulness and sleep, where odd ideas bloom, ideas that sometimes solve real problems. Not hallucinations, but strange puzzles that only reveal themselves when the logical gates are down. Like the brain saying, "Quick, before he wakes up, let's toss this in." You smile at the thought. Your own mind has probably done this too. Half asleep in the shower or while staring at the ceiling and suddenly bam, a solution to something you've been chewing on for weeks. And maybe that's the secret behind Edison's method. Not the noise, not the balls, but the permission to hover in the blur, to fall into almost sleep, and let the brain stretch out in a soft, directionless way. So tonight, even if you don't have any ball bearings or brass keys, you can still dip your toes into that quiet place, that edge of dream territory where your thoughts go soft and floaty like clouds that forgot their purpose. Edison may have resisted sleep, but his subconscious, it napped in the corners and invented things behind his back. And you're doing just fine. Let go of the metal tray. Let the ideas fall if they want. You don't need to catch them all. Some things, including you, are just better off resting. Now, just when you think you've heard the most extreme of sleep routines, you stumble into the quiet, humming world of Nikola Tesla, the man who may have invented wireless electricity, and may have almost completely given up on sleep to do it. You tiptoe through the high-ceilinged New York hotel suite he called home in his later years. The air is heavy with ozone and the smell of polished brass. There are stacks of paper, endless calculations, coils of wire that look like sleeping snakes, and no bed in sight, just a chair with suspiciously Tesla-shaped cushions. You see, Tesla wasn't interested in traditional sleeping arrangements, or traditional anything really. He famously claimed he only needed 2 hours of sleep per night. Just 2. That's the amount most people get when their toddler has the flu. And yet Tesla insisted he could function no thrive on that schedule. Historians still argue whether Tesla exaggerated for effect or truly managed to function with that little rest. Some say he took short naps like Da Vinci. Others believe he genuinely existed in a semi-permanent, coffee-fueled, trance-like state. His assistants reported him working through the night for days, only pausing to pace or mutter to himself. One assistant once found him standing silently in the dark, staring at a glowing coil and whispering numbers to the wall. When asked what he was doing, Tesla replied, "Listening." And honestly, that's the most Tesla answer possible. But the real curiosity comes with how he described sleep. He didn't call it rest. He saw it as a biological interruption, an inconvenience imposed by the weak. "I do not think you can name many great inventions that have been made by married men," he once said. It's a wildly off-topic quote, but it gives you a window into the mind of a man who believed all earthly attachments, including slumber, were distractions from the divine symphony of ideas. And yet here's a quirky detail that softens the image. Tesla loved pigeons. He cared for them, obsessively feeding them in the park, even inviting injured ones into his suite. There's one white pigeon in particular he claimed he loved, as a man loves a woman. When she died, he said a light went out in his life. So even the sleepless had moments of gentle pause. You picture him now reclining in that old chair, eyes half-lidded, whispering to the flickering plasma of his inventions, while a pigeon perches nearby, watching like a fluffy night guard. Tesla didn't exactly sleep, but he definitely entered some kind of nightly reverie. Whether it was rest trance or time travel, no one really knows. There's also a theory, a slightly fringe one, that Tesla suffered from hypnagogic hallucinations, vivid images and sounds that occur at the edge of sleep. He described flashes of light and visions that brought him entire designs in an instant. Were these symptoms of extreme sleep deprivation or gifts of a mind tuned to a different frequency? Modern neurologists suspect both. Sleep deprivation does trigger hallucinations, but sometimes these semi-dream states can unlock deeply creative parts of the brain. Tesla may have danced dangerously close to that line between clarity and chaos, genius and unraveling. And still there's a tenderness in the thought. The idea that while others slept deeply, Tesla wandered the corridors of thought alone, listening to electricity sketching machines and cradling pigeons in his sleepless hands. You don't need to mimic him. You're allowed to lie down. But isn't it a wonder that in a world obsessed with productivity, this man chose silence over sleep sparks, over slumber, and perhaps even in your own drifting thoughts tonight, a little bit of that Tesla quiet can seep in, a gentle reminder that the night holds its own kind of energy even when your eyes are closed. So here you are, hovering on the edge of dreams, with Tesla caught in that charged limbo between night and not quite morning. You begin to wonder, were those visions he claimed to see in the dark hours actual dreams? Or something else Tesla once said, he could design entire machines in his mind down to the bolts and screws, and then test them mentally, letting them run in his imagination for weeks, observing wear and tear, then adjusting them, all without ever touching a wrench. You try to picture it, a man pacing in the dark, staring into nothing and seeing everything. No blueprints, no models, just the symphony of wire and gears swirling behind his eyelids. Historians still argue whether Tesla's visions were a product of pure genius or the neurological echoes of extreme sleep deprivation. Some claim he was tapping into an advanced form of lucid dreaming. Others suggest he was sliding perilously into a state of hallucination, hallmark signs of hypnagogia, the twilight zone of the brain. That's the space right between wakefulness and sleep, where you sometimes hear a voice call your name or see flashes of light behind your closed eyes. Most of us get there by accident, brushing past it like a shadow on the stairs. But Tesla, he set up camp there. One of his oddest habits: he would sit in pitch darkness with his hands clasped and eyes closed, waiting, not meditating exactly, but watching, as he described it, for the dance of light and form. He claimed this was where his best ideas were born, a form of mental sketching so vivid he didn't trust paper to keep up. Imagine what it must have felt like, sitting for hours in silence, refusing rest, yet somehow opening a door inside the mind that most of us only glimpse in our dreams. You wonder if his inventions were sparked by knowledge, or by something sleep tried to show him when he barely let it in. And yet Tesla was also deeply fragile. He feared germs wouldn't shake hands, and was repulsed by human hair. He ate alone, often in silence, calculating the cubic volume of each bite before swallowing. He lived in rigid patterns, but inside his mind flew loose like a thunderstorm in a bottle. There's a famous story where he suddenly stopped mid-dinner fork, suspended mid-air, and announced he had just visualized a new turbine. He rushed out, coat half on, and didn't sleep for 3 days while sketching. That's either dedication or a man very overdue for a nap. It's possible Tesla didn't just avoid sleep, he feared it. As if resting might steal something from him, dull the visions, or worse, silence them. And so, night after night, he hovered in that lucid fog, listening for electric whispers only he could hear. Modern psychologists now wonder if Tesla was what we'd call today neurodivergent. Exceptionally gifted, yes, but perhaps wired in ways that made traditional rest feel like static. For him, sleep was an interruption, not a reset. But for all his brilliance, you get the sense he was also lonely. Not the tragic romance kind. The no one else can see what I see kind. The kind of quiet that hums too loudly when the world has gone to bed. And here you are, not inventing, not sketching, just listening. Thinking maybe you've floated past that place in your own life once or twice. A weird half-sleep moment when your brain handed you an answer you didn't know you needed. That's the gift of these midnight musings. You don't have to be Nikola Tesla to visit that edge. You just have to let go, close your eyes, and trust that your mind, for all its tangles, knows where to wander. Tonight, no ball bearings, no sparks, just you and the quiet hum of thought. And if a flash of something strange drifts by as you fall asleep, don't worry. It's probably just Tesla saying hello. You step now into a room that smells not of ozone or linseed oil, but of cigars and history. A room with thick curtains, war maps on the wall, and a decanter of brandy never quite sealed. Welcome to the world of Winston Churchill, the bulldog of Britain, the napper-in-chief of World War II. It may surprise you to learn that Churchill, famous for his gravelly speeches, iron will, and refusal to surrender, was also fiercely protective of one thing above all: his afternoon nap. Every single day at precisely 5 p.m., Churchill changed into silk pajamas, drew the curtains, and demanded an hour and a half of sleep. Not rest, not quiet time, actual horizontal full uniform nap. And if he was in the war room aboard a battleship or in a bomb shelter, he didn't care. Nap time was sacred. Historians still argue whether this routine was inherited from his aristocratic upbringing, modeled after colonial customs, or simply a way to carve sanity out of chaos. One theory says he used his naps not just for recovery, but as a cognitive reset, allowing him to divide his day into 2 sharp-focused halves, essentially working 2 days in one. And here's the wild part: it worked. During World War II, when most leaders were running on adrenaline and bad coffee. Churchill was slipping into bed mid-air raids, be damned, and waking up refreshed, ready to govern a crumbling world with one hand and cradle a whiskey soda in the other. You might think it irresponsible. But then again, this was the man who said, "Don't think you will be doing less work because you sleep during the day." That's a foolish notion held by people who have no imagination. And imagination. He had it in spades. Churchill didn't just nap, he made a whole ritual of it. He traveled with silk robes, slippers, and an extra pillow. Staff were trained to draw curtains just so. If he was staying at someone else's house, he'd politely inform them, "I must now retire. I shall return after my slumber." This wasn't laziness, this was strategic restoration. You picture it now, the war cabinet in full swing, ministers sweating over communiques, while in the next room Churchill is sprawled out, snoring softly, cigar on a tray, documents on the nightstand, and a bulldog named Rufus curled at his feet. The world burns, but the man naps. One quirky detail: Churchill worked from bed often. He would dictate memos in his robe, wearing slippers with a breakfast tray balanced precariously nearby. His secretaries stood at attention while he puffed his cigar and discussed global strategy with a pillow behind his head. It's like the world's most chaotic TED Talk, but in bed and during a world war. Historians still argue about the psychological effects of his sleep schedule. Was it genuinely restorative? Or was it simply how he coped with unbearable pressure? Fringe theories suggest his napping may have stemmed from bipolar tendencies, helping regulate his energy swings. But whatever the cause, the result was clear: he functioned. Remarkably. Even President Roosevelt noted how Churchill seemed most alive at night. They'd meet at midnight, clink glasses, and debate wartime plans over roast beef. Roosevelt bleary-eyed. Churchill bright-eyed, freshly napped. You smile in the dark, now, imagining this stout, unstoppable force of history, treating nap time with the reverence of royal duty. There's something wonderfully absurd about a man who could rally nations, negotiate with Stalin, and still get cranky if he missed his pillow. But maybe his greatest act of wartime defiance wasn't against Hitler, it was against exhaustion. When the world told him there was no time to sleep, he simply replied, "Watch me." And now, lying here yourself, you feel oddly reassured. You're not in a war room. You're not wrapped in silk. But the lesson holds: sometimes the bravest, smartest thing you can do is shut the door, draw the curtains, and let the body catch up with the mind. So go ahead. Take your Churchill hour. And if anyone questions you, just say it's part of your strategic leadership protocol. Then roll over and nap, like you're carrying the fate of the free world on your very relaxed shoulders. You remain wrapped in that cozy Churchillian haze, drifting now into his most curious wartime invention, not a tank or a telegram, but the nap-enabled war cabinet. You imagine it a bomb shelter beneath London. The air is thick with maps, tobacco, and worry. Generals pace with clenched jaws, secretaries murmur over telegrams, and in the center of it all, a small reserved chamber behind a thick wooden door. The lights dimmed. A soft armchair waits. Maybe even a little brandy on the side table. This, dear listener, is where Churchill naps during the Blitz. Historians still marvel at it. When sirens wailed overhead, most people ducked and prayed. Churchill. He ducked under the covers for exactly 90 minutes. Not a moment more, not a moment less. Bombs fell, orders flew, and he snored. Churchill wasn't simply indulging in creature comforts, he was tactically napping. He believed with unshakable certainty that his power to lead depended on rest. That clarity in crisis came not from charging forward endlessly, but from stepping back for just long enough to think clearly, return stronger. And here's a delightful twist. He didn't nap alone. Members of his staff were often encouraged read, ordered to nap too. Field marshals, stenographers, advisors. They all learned to nap like it was part of their job description. Imagine the war room like a giant, slightly chaotic slumber party where battles were paused, snores were tolerated, and dreams may have included tank schematics and rhymed speeches. Quirky detail. Churchill allegedly wore a onesie-style sleeping suit complete with matching slippers even during diplomatic visits. He'd excuse himself, change into his sleeping uniform, and return from his nap ready to deliver scathing insight on global affairs. You can't help but picture it, the Prime Minister in a fluffy zip-up, delivering hard truths to generals in full military regalia. Historians still argue whether his team found this endearing or exasperating. Some adored his eccentric rhythm. Others tried to keep up and failed, miserably collapsing by 10 p.m., while Churchill roared on into the night, well-napped, well-fed, and vaguely resembling a sentient bulldog with a cigar. But you see the pattern now, don't you? Across centuries, the most unusual minds embraced sleep not as escape, but as a tool, an ally in brilliance. Churchill in his soft slippers and thunderous snore wielded naps like a secret weapon, as if to say, "You can't defeat me." I've had rest. It's strangely comforting. The idea that in the face of enormous global pressure, anyone paused to take a nap. Not a breakdown, not a meltdown. A nap. And maybe in your own life, that's the lesson hidden beneath the cigar smoke and velvet robes that rest isn't the absence of strength. It's a kind of strength all its own. So tonight, as the lights dim softly around your room and your own thoughts begin to stretch and yawn, remember Churchill in his silk pajamas dozing behind reinforced walls, letting the world spin quietly while he gathered his energy to speak, to lead, to carry on. Let your own thoughts retreat behind a heavy wooden door. Let the maps fold the war room voices fade. You don't need a cigar or a secret tunnel, just breath and a soft place to land. The night is long, but you, dear listener, are allowed to rest. You wander now into the shadows of candlelit corridors and dusty observatories, no longer with Churchill, but with a man who saw the cosmos not through telescopes, but through the prism of pure thought. Welcome to the strange and sleepless world of Isaac Newton. Picture him in a long black coat, pacing back and forth across creaky wooden floorboards. Outside, an apple tree sleeps beneath the stars. Inside, Newton does not. Here's the thing about Newton: he barely slept. Not because he believed naps were inefficient. Not because he had a curated pajama ritual like Churchill. No, Newton skipped sleep because he forgot to do it. Once he got so deep into an equation that he reportedly skipped meals for several days and only stopped when someone noticed he was muttering to himself while chewing on the wooden frame of his glasses. That's not a joke. That's Tuesday for Isaac Newton. Historians still argue whether Newton's insomnia was the result of intense focus anxiety or perhaps what we'd now recognize as clinical OCD. But whatever the cause, it shaped one of the most curious sleep stories in history. He wrote most of his revolutionary texts, the Principia Mathematica theories of motion and gravity, while awake in the deep hours of the night. His journals suggest he slept only 2 to 3 hours at a time, and often not until morning. He lived like a bat with algebra homework. Quirky tidbit: Newton believed in alchemical sleep. He thought dreams were messages from higher realms. He once tried to induce visionary states by staring at the sun for so long that he temporarily blinded himself, then documented the colors he saw in the dark. You might call it science. You might also call it a psychotic break. Potato. But one thing's certain: he didn't value sleep the way most of us do. He saw it as a door, sometimes useful, mostly annoying, and often best avoided. His bedroom was less a place of rest and more a scientific lab in disguise, cluttered with books, retorts, crucibles, and probably 0 throw pillows. And yet for all his brilliance, Newton wasn't immune to nighttime demons. Letters from his later life hint at nightmares, paranoia, and extended periods of near madness. He once cut off all contact with friends and family for months, emerging only to angrily recatalogue his collection of theological manuscripts. Historians debate whether this decline was triggered by mercury poisoning, a byproduct of his alchemical experiments, chronic exhaustion, or the sheer pressure of genius. Fringe theories even suggest he suffered mental breaks due to sleep deprivation, hallucinating divine revelations that blurred science with mysticism. You lie quietly now processing this image of Newton hunched over candlelight eyes, read muttering equations while his brain crackles on the edge of collapse. There's a strange intimacy in knowing that even the man who decoded gravity couldn't quite manage bedtime. But here's what's oddly inspiring: he used the night. He transformed silence into motion, emptiness into discovery. For Newton, sleep wasn't the end of the day, it was a rival he tried to outthink. And yet even geniuses meet their limits. By the end of his life, Newton had withdrawn into solitude, obsessively refining his earlier theories, not with excitement, but a kind of haunted rigor. He couldn't turn it off. He'd spent decades thinking in the dark, and the darkness had grown roots. So what do we take from him, you and I? Not that sleep is the enemy, but that genius untethered from rest can stretch itself thin. That even the brightest minds need a pause, a silence, a long breath. You're not racing toward gravity tonight. You're letting go of it. You're not measuring celestial orbits. You're drifting among them. So turn out the candle. Let the apple stay on the tree. And where Newton chose numbers, you choose peace. For in this moment, brilliance lies not in staying awake, but in falling gently asleep. You're floating now through the stillness of Newton's candlelit world, but something stirs in the shadows. Not just equations or falling apples, but the monsters of the mind, the kind that only crawl out when the world goes quiet. Because for all the tales of scientific triumph, Isaac Newton was haunted. Not by ghosts exactly, but by dreams, visions and fears he could never quite explain away. You lie there, half curious, half cozy, and gently drift into the more fragile corners of this genius's midnight thoughts. Newton believed the universe was governed by immutable laws, gravity, motion, light, and yet he also feared that chaos lurked just behind the veil, that the cosmos could snap at any moment into disarray, and perhaps his own mind could too. He often woke in the middle of the night, gripped by anxiety. Letters suggest he heard voices, saw visions, and once believed he was being punished by God. He fasted excessively. He slept in clothes. He barely ate. And when he dreamed, oh, how he dreamed. Historians still argue whether these visions were the product of mercury poisoning from his alchemical experiments, or if Newton was simply teetering on the tightrope between logic and obsession. A brilliant mind chasing meaning into the dark, trying to thread theology and science into one long, sleepless narrative. One fringe theory even suggests he purposely deprived himself of sleep to sharpen spiritual visions, that by staying awake through the night, staring into fire and silence, he could pierce the veil and see the divine mechanism of the universe. You picture it now, a man wrapped in a threadbare cloak, sitting motionless for hours, scribbling fragments of prophecy onto the same parchment where once he'd written about calculus. The same hand calculating planetary orbits now shook while sketching the end of days. And yet there was always structure in his madness. Even his nightmares had equations. One passage from his writings refers to the trembling hour of illumination, a phrase that sounds poetic, until you realize it likely refers to a sleep-deprived hallucination involving angelic geometry. You shift slightly under your blanket now, not from fear, but fascination. The idea that even the most rational among us might crack open under the pressure of perpetual thought. That sometimes too much truth, too fast without rest, becomes something else entirely. There's a lesson here not in his brilliance, but in his burnout. Newton, for all his legacy, ended his life alone, combing through scripture more than science. He became increasingly rigid, dogmatic, unwilling to entertain anything that didn't fit the divine formula he'd etched into his bones. Some say he stopped sleeping altogether for days at a time, and yet he remained reverent toward knowledge, toward mystery, toward the night itself. You imagine him old and nearly blind, running his fingers over ancient books by candlelight, whispering formulas like prayers. The night no longer a blank slate, but a cathedral of unanswered questions. It's strange comfort, isn't it? That someone so towering, so disciplined, still trembled in the dark. That even Newton, master of reason, sometimes just needed someone to say, "It's okay. You can rest now." So let's say it together softly, it's okay. You can rest now. Let the questions wait. Let the logic soften. The stars still shine, and the apple still falls even when your eyes are closed. You're coasting now into the soft outer rim of this galaxy of geniuses, and here the air grows a little clearer. The stories have grown strange and sweet, filled with sleep rituals and rituals that tried to replace sleep. But now it's time to lean back and ask the question that's been floating at the edge of every tale. Do brilliant minds really need to sleep less? Or have we just romanticized their exhaustion? You breathe slowly, thoughts drifting like candle smoke, and begin unraveling the myth. The idea that true genius burns the midnight oil, bleeds caffeine, and rises on 2 hours rest like a phoenix of productivity. We hear it in documentaries, interviews, late-night tweets from tech billionaires. Sleep is for the weak. But is it? You lie still and think of Leonardo micro-napping like a drowsy hummingbird, of Einstein wrapped in 10 full hours of velvet sleep, of Churchill snoring in a silk suit, of Tesla blinking in the dark halfway to another dimension, and of Newton unraveling like a threadbare coat because he couldn't close his eyes for long enough. Historians still argue whether sleep deprivation truly enhanced these figures' creativity, or if they succeeded, despite it, because of robust minds and occasional naps, not the other way around. A growing body of research suggests what your body already knows: sleep isn't laziness. It's necessary. The brain during sleep isn't resting. It's recoding, rewiring. It sweeps out useless information, sharpens memory, and connects ideas you never knew were related. In fact, REM sleep in particular has been linked to creative problem solving. Not just rest, but actual innovation. So maybe the myth isn't that geniuses don't sleep. Maybe the myth is that they didn't need to. You think again of Edison snatching little power naps like they were state secrets, of Da Vinci drifting in and out like a tide, of Einstein absolutely buried under a quilt until noon. Modern studies show that even short naps, 10, 20, 30 minutes, can boost mental clarity, mood, and creative performance. The real trick isn't avoiding sleep, it's learning how to partner with it. Not as a luxury, but as a co-creator. You feel the tug now, don't you? A strange peace, knowing that your most productive self might not be the over-caffeinated up till 3 a.m. version. It might be the one under the blanket, eyes closed, heart rate low, mind free to wander without pressure. And isn't it a relief to know that you don't have to suffer to be brilliant? That genius doesn't have to arrive hollow-eyed and muttering. That sleep isn't a detour from greatness, it's the bridge to it. So tonight maybe you let go of the myth. You don't have to be Tesla-wired and whispering to pigeons. Or Newton scribbling by candlelight while forgetting to eat. You get to be you, someone who values ideas, yes, but also values quiet. Safety. Slowness. Let the myth fall away like an old blanket that's finally been washed and folded. Let your body unfurl without shame. No one's asking you to trade sleep for success anymore. Let yourself be soft. Let yourself be still. And let sleep, that gentle collaborator, take you wherever it pleases. Now, as the night deepens and the myths have softened, you begin to drift sideways into something more curious. Still the borderlands of sleep, that slippery place between dreaming and waking, where genius sometimes tiptoes in its socks and ideas sneak in uninvited. Because if there's one pattern we've seen across the minds of Vinci, Tesla, Einstein, Churchill, and Newton, it's that the best ideas don't always come when you're trying. Sometimes they arrive while you're brushing your teeth, or halfway into a nap, or hovering in that hazy space where the brain sighs and says, "Fine, I'll show you something." But only if you're cool about it. You're entering what neuroscientists call the hypnagogic state, the liminal twilight zone between alertness and slumber. It's here that Salvador Dalí saw his melting clocks, here that Edison let ball bearings slip from his hands, here that Einstein and Newton likely stumbled upon insights too strange for daylight. Historians still argue whether this state is truly responsible for innovation or just a playground for pattern-seeking brains. But studies show that this fringe of sleep can unlock associations that our awake minds would never dare to connect. One fringe experiment even tried to measure the brainwaves of mathematicians and artists as they nodded off, finding that right before sleep, their brains lit up with unusual linkages between unrelated concepts. It's as if the mind, freed from the need to make sense, finally felt safe enough to get weird. And getting weird might just be the first step to getting brilliant. You smile at the thought your own sleepy brain swirling right now in colors and half-sentences. Maybe you too are only one half-nap away from your best idea yet. A nap that doesn't ask you to fix anything, solve anything, or even remember your to-do list. Just a nap for the sake of dreaming. One quirky example: Paul McCartney reportedly composed the melody for Yesterday in a dream. When he woke up, he played it on the piano, unsure whether he'd heard it before or created it. For days, he called it scrambled eggs. So yes, sometimes the genius stuff really does rise with the yolks. And then there's Mary Shelley, who dreamt of a pale figure stitched together and jolted to life in a lightning storm, waking up to write Frankenstein. That wasn't caffeine. That was REM stage drama. You begin to see it now, the gentle thread connecting every sleepless genius and every dreamer they didn't chase brilliance. They wandered into it, usually sideways, often sleepily. And perhaps more than technique or strategy, what they all shared was a willingness to listen to the subconscious, to honor the mind's strange rhythms, even if it meant napping in the middle of battle plans or holding on to a spoon until it clattered into genius. So tonight, you lie there, eyes soft, thoughts slow, and wonder what might be floating just beneath your waking mind. What ideas have been waiting quietly for you to let go and pressure. No performance, just presence. Let your body hum low like a cello string. Let your thoughts move like fog. Maybe as your muscles soften and your breathing deepens, you'll catch a glimmer of something unexpected. A sentence, a memory, a flash of creativity drifting in on a sleep-tinted breeze. Or maybe not. Maybe all that happens tonight is rest. And that, dear listener, might be the most brilliant idea of all. And now, after wandering through dream states and candle-lit obsessions, you reach the quiet edge of our journey. This is where the noise fades, where the great thinkers lay their heads down eventually, and where the gentle truth hums beneath it all. Even genius gets tired. You return in your mind to Leonardo, leaning back in his chair, brush falling from his fingers, dreaming in sepia tones. To Einstein, snoring lightly under a mountain of blankets with a violin in one corner and a half-written theory in the other. To Edison, nodding off with metal balls clenched in hand, pretending he's just thinking. To Churchill, silk-robed and undisturbed in the middle of a war. To Tesla, forever teetering between invention and dream, perhaps never sure which side of consciousness he truly lived on. And you think maybe they weren't escaping sleep. Maybe they were negotiating with it, trying to shape it around their minds like a custom-fitted glove. Historians still debate whether sleep is the source of their brilliance or merely the backdrop against which their ideas bloomed. But what's certain is this: none of them did it right. They just did it their way. There is no correct number of hours, no perfect formula, no one-size-fits-all approach to dreaming. Some slept in stolen minutes, some curled up like cats, some forgot entirely, but all of them eventually always slept. And now so do you. You begin to feel the slow weight of your own thoughts settling like books closed on a nightstand. The hum of the day has faded. You are not solving relativity. You are not sketching helicopters. You are not deciphering the laws of planetary motion by candlelight. You are simply letting go. No need to mimic anyone. No pressure to extract insight from your rest. Your genius, your beauty, your full humanity, none of it demands sleeplessness. In fact, the opposite is true. It asks you to surrender, to soften, to float. The thinkers we've followed tonight weren't superhuman. They were sensitive, strange, stubborn, scared. But what made them remarkable wasn't just their minds. It was their willingness to explore the in-between places, between sense and nonsense, between waking and dreaming, between fact and feeling. And that's where you are now. So let the final pages close. Let the ink dry. Let the maps roll up and the clocks slow down. There is no war room here, no equations, no need for socks, only the sound of your breath, only the softness of now, only the still small miracle of sleep, and now nothing left but stillness. The stories have slowed. The voices of Vinci and Einstein, of Tesla and Churchill have drifted away like ships disappearing into a gentle fog. Their footsteps fade, their papers settle, and the echoes of invention give way to something even older than thought itself: rest. You feel your body sink a little deeper into the surface beneath you. The muscles in your face relax. Your fingers go still. There's no need to think, no need to remember. If anything lingers, let it be a softness. If anything stirs, let it be a dream. The night has you now. Breathe in through your nose. Let the air feel cool and quiet. Breathe out slowly, like you're letting go of a balloon. Let the breath carry with it whatever noise the day left behind: plans, worries, effort. There is no effort here. Only the weight of the blanket, the hush of the room, the sound of the world continuing without needing anything from you at all. You're floating now, unmoored from schedules, unbothered by clocks, drifting sideways into your own version of the hypnagogic space, a dream just beginning to unfold. And who knows, maybe a quiet idea will pass through you tonight. Or maybe not. Either way, you're exactly where you need to be. Still, safe, and gently slipping beneath the waves. Let the mind settle. Let the lights go out. And from one sleepless soul to another. Good night.